Jay and I have known each other now for, I don't even know how many years it's been. I'm going to go with 15 years,
Oh,
maybe
probably 20.
20 years, maybe.
Yeah, it was back
And
when Dib wrote the book. Yeah.
yeah, so here's the story, and I alluded to this on the email, but the story of how Jay and I really kind of met really is kind of funny. So I was your typical photo person who did not understand aperture. I didn't understand the triangle. I had a DSLR in automatic mode, just like so many people who have DSLRs. And I really wanted to take it to the next level. And I started reading and looking at different books, and none of them made sense to me. And they talk about like shooting wide open. I'm like, what does shooting wide open mean? Like, you know, oh, the best aperture? I just didn't know that. So things didn't really make sense to me. And then I have the book up on my bookshelf here. I got this book, Perfect Digital Photography. And I read the book and I was like, the light bulb went off, like, holy crap. Like, it was written for people like me. Like, it just made sense. Like, this is, I don't know, it just literally, like, I don't know why. It just, I tell everybody who wants to learn about photography to get this book. And so I read it, and about, I don't know, a year later, I was in Florida for PMA back when there was a trade show in Orlando out there, and had done the show. I was working with Lexar at the time, and I did the show, and I was leaving the show, and I was at the airport, and I was in line at the airport, and the guy in front of me was wearing a low pro bag, and I thought, oh, he must be a photographer. So I said to him, are you a photographer? And we started talking, and he goes, yeah. And he goes, who do you work for? And I said, Lexar. He goes, oh, I'm sponsored by Lexar. And I said, oh. Anyway, so we started talking, and we go through the security line. And then we both got there really early. So we had like, I think we had a good hour and a half to kill. And we said, let's just get something to eat. This is back when you could actually eat in an airport without masks on. Anyway, so we sat down to get some lunch, and Jay said, hey, I'll be right back. I need to use a restroom. I'll never forget this. And he handed me his business card and put it down on the table because he goes, will you watch my stuff or whatever? And I said, sure. Well, the business card, Jay, am I wrong? Didn't it have this picture on the business card?
May have, yeah.
I think it did. But there's also the picture in this book with the trail, someone walking with a light. And
Yep.
anyway, he put his business card down, and I sat there, and I'm like, holy crap, this is the guy that wrote the book that I love. I'm not very intuitive when it comes to names. I didn't put two and two together. So Jay came back to join me for lunch, and I'm like, holy crap, like, you wrote the book. And I think I spent the next 20 minutes telling Jay how much I love the book, like every detail. And so that's how it started. And we've become friends ever since. But Jay, I'm gonna have Jay introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background. Jay has been doing unbelievable work. He's been sponsored by Olympus for a long, long time, and doing work with National Geographic. I'll let him tell you about that. But he's, as I said in the email, I think he's been around the world way more times than I have, which is a lot. And so with that, I want to let Jay tell you about himself. I have some of his images, which I will share with you guys, and let him tell some stories about them. And then if you guys have questions, as always, feel free to put them in the chat area. And with that, it's all you, Jay.
Thank you, Jeff. Yep, we do go back a ways. So, and I appreciate, I actually owe you a commission for all those books you've sold for me. So, and I hope you all hear me okay. My
I've sold a
regular
lot.
computer crashed, and this one's a little funky. So hopefully it's going on there. But first, I want to thank you all for taking your time out this afternoon. It's greatly appreciated. Giving your time to us for this is huge. So thank you very much. Yeah, I've been in the business for 45 plus years as a photographer. Worked with the newspaper in Dallas. I got on way back in Dallas. Joined the Dallas Times Herald in 1970. I got in with a book that wouldn't get me through the front door of a porta potty these days. The guy that was a chief of photography at the Times Herald kind of felt sorry for me. Here came this kid, well-intentioned, had okay stuff. It's a long story. I won't go into it, but I started working with the Times Herald, intimidated. I almost called in before I went to work there my first day to tell them I couldn't do it because I had fudged my way. I'd embellished my resume slightly. But But I went in that Monday, and one of the first photographers to whom I was introduced was Bob Jackson, who took the picture of Lee Harvey Oswald being shot by Jack Ruby. So I realized I am in way over my head, but it was just this amazing experience because I was shooting 3 to 5 assignments a day. The diversity was all over the place, from spot news to sports to feature, and you had to produce. There was no excuse. They didn't want to hear, oh, you weren't in a good mood today, you didn't feel creative. Tough. Produce. We've got to put something in the paper. We were a sleepy afternoon paper when I got there. We had a 300,000, 400,000 circulation. But about a year and a half after I got to the Times Herald, the LA Times Mirror bought us, brought Tom Johnson in as the editor. He called me in shortly after he got there, and he said, we're going to change this paper to a morning paper. We're going to make it a nationally prominent, if not internationally prominent paper. You're the young guy on the staff. We want you to start covering events worldwide on a moment's notice. Are you interested? I was like, duh. And it took off from there. And it was absolutely amazing, because literally sometimes we'd hire a Learjet to go photograph the Santa Fe prison riot or whatever else, or fly, immediate go down to South America to photograph the Armera mudslide. And it was incredibly heady for a 20-something-year-old kid, because you were the eyes for the viewership. I've always preached how important photography is in our lives. We are visual creatures. If I mention 9/11 or your first birthday or your first pet or the Vietnam War, on and on, whether you call upon it or not, it's a still image that comes to mind, because that's how we think, that's how we process. And that's what I still love about this business. I get really passionate talking about this. Most of my work these days is for National Geographic expeditions or our own First Light workshops, which I'm going to shamelessly promote in a minute. But for geographic expeditions, it's all over the world. I've done 15 around the world trips for them. Been on other, but I'm not honking my horn. I'm amazed when I think about it. Like, I can't believe I've been so fortunate to get to do this. And it's what's amazing still is after 45 plus years, I still get out on those where I'm a lecturer, and I'm also shooting those trips like I would, and I shoot it as a narrative, like I would for a story for the magazine. And I build a presentation as a narrative for this. But I'll tell you what, I still pick that camera up, and it's still that magic that comes through me. Like, this is utterly amazing that I get to do this, that you get to be the eyes and introduce people to places. So yeah, I've been in the business for a long time. I worked with the newspaper, Dallas Times Herald, for 16 years. We moved to Denver. We're in Denver now. And I started working with Geographic in about 86. The first story I shot for them was in 79. It was a story on Peter Jenkins, who walked across America. They did a 2-part story on it. Myself and Skeeter Hagler, my best friend, who was a photographer in Texas, shot Peter from from Dallas to Florence, Oregon, to finish the trip. I didn't think I was ready to work for Geographic at that point, nor did Geographic think I was ready to work for them at that point. But I started working for them regularly in about 86, 87.
And
No one does what they...
Because did you go to them at that point, or did they come to you?
They came to me, which was pretty cool. It's a long, involved story, but they came to me. I had known Tom Kennedy, who was a director of photography, through the business. I was really fortunate in the early 80s. I'd won a Pulitzer Prize for my work out of El Salvador, and that prize gives you profile. But this is also a business that was great what you did then. What can you do for us now? So you've really got to keep producing. But Tom, I had just been remarried to the woman I'm still with back in 86, went to New York to speak for World Press as a World Press winner. Tom Kennedy was there. Becky and I, my wife and I, sat with him at dinner, and we were having fun watching all the young photographers trying to get into his line of vision. And I didn't want to approach him because, God, I didn't want to have to make over Travel Geographic. That was always legendary about what a nightmare that could be. You'd be gone for 11 months a year. And I just was, married this person I wanted to be with. So we were just kind of hanging back, and we were eating dinner with Tom, and he said, I'd love for you to work for us. And I was kind of like, that's really nice, Tom. I'll get back to you. And I kind of kind of put him off for a while. Then he called a few months later and he said, "Hey, we really want you to work for us." So he came up. They had a story. They asked me to do it. One of my first shoots was fires at Yellowstone National Park in '88. And then immediately after that, they asked me to do a story in Papua New Guinea. It was 3 months living in Papua New Guinea. Really interesting story. Uh, and then it kind of went from there. And like I said, several years ago, their expedition side asked me if I'd be interested in working on expeditions, which are trips that anybody can sign up for. Aircraft trips, ship-based trips, land-based trips, workshop, all of these come under that umbrella, and started working for them, and it kind of resonated. I love talking about photography. I love sharing whatever I happen to know about it. It doesn't take long to do that, but and I love shooting pictures. I'm never going to stop shooting pictures. So it was a perfect blend. I mean, and they keep me busy. Last year, I shot in 31 countries for them. That was last year. This year started off pretty hot. I shot 11 in January, and then COVID hit, and my year disappeared. So that's one reason I'm here today, because I'm here.
So, Jay, have you ever been grounded this long and not been on an airplane?
Period. I can tell you, there's not even I didn't have to hesitate to think about that. No, this has been the longest.
Great.
My wife, Becky, does look at me every now and then. Don't you need to hit the road again?
Right. Seriously. When you shot your first gigs for Nat Geo, were you nervous? I mean, I think I would be scared to death of coming back with stuff that wasn't up to, I mean, even if it was great images, you think, is it good enough for them? Were you worried about that?
Yeah. No, I wasn't worried. I was terrified. Yeah, I mean, I would stay up all night thinking because it's not a thing of I'm going to go in for 8 hours a day when I'm on assignment. And the interesting thing with Geographic, and I hope my voice is coming over okay, but the interesting thing with Geographic is that your research. So probably out of my contract for a story, 70 to 80% of that contract is research. I'm setting up where I'm going. I'm building that story. So, I mean, they give every inch in the world to hang yourself with. And that pressure is there because promise, there's a boatload of people with incredible portfolios waiting for you to fail. And but it's interesting shooting for the magazine too, because it's all about visual narrative on that. I mean, I've seen incredible photographers whose work would just be beautiful in the magazine, but they don't work in the term of narrative, building a story of photographs. And that's one thing I teach in our workshops is this idea of this template kind of visual narrative. And I talk about that in perfect digital photography too, that in my thinking is if you shoot 2 or more photographs anywhere, you step into the world of narrative, of telling your story. And I think it empowers a photographer if you approach it with the idea that there's a template, that if you approach your storytelling narrative with this template, it creates a better body of work. And that's got to have a sense of place. Photograph. That's incredibly important. If you go to the Grand Canyon and you tell all your friends you were there and you want to come over and come on over, I want to show you my pictures from my trip to Grand Canyon. You've got to have something that gives that sense of place. You're going to lose your audience so quickly if you don't. It's been proven that you're an audience looking at Geographic or your slideshow on your website is going to give your picture about a half second of interest, of attention. If you don't engage them, if you don't pull them into your world, they're gone. So it's always interesting too, because people think, wow, I shot for Geographic, I have a 40-page story. I can tell my life story in 40 pages. Well, 40 pages is 20 spreads, right? And those 20 spreads, you've got to share it with a thing called text, which is ugly sometimes. But those 20 pages, 20 spreads become 11 or 12 photographs. You spent months maybe shooting a story. What's the criteria? What's the deciding factor of how those pictures work together? And it's a connectivity. It's a connective tissue that kind of carries one to the other. So, but that template again is you got to have a sense of place. You have to introduce your cast of characters. Detail is incredibly important because detail forces your audience to sometimes engage in a way of seeing a scene that they hadn't before. You grab them by the eyeballs and take them up close to something. When you shoot a landscape, that landscape is made up of all this minutia of detail. So take the viewer in to see that. So you've got sense of place, you have introduce your cast of characters, you have detail, then you have that one that just resonates over every kind of photography, and that's moment. Moment just trumps every. Jeff, you shoot sports, you're in that world completely of moment.
Well,
And
and a lot of, and actually this, it's interesting, Jake, because what you're saying is very much what I've been saying to this group of people for a long time, which is our job is to tell a story, right? So for me,
totally.
it is to tell the story of what's happening in that sport or whatever event I'm shooting, and no different than what you're saying, because it is true that I remember. It's funny because I was talking about all the slides that I've got to scan that my dad took, and two things that are interesting about it. One is I remember sitting in the and upstairs in the study of our house, and my dad with his, the slide projector, and we'd have to see his pictures from his trip, and it's pretty boring as a kid sometimes, and you know, even for those types of shots, it's way more interesting if there's a story to them, and
Absolutely.
and actually one of the sad things, and I guess I'll bring this up now, is I looked at all of my dad's slides. I mean, there were a lot, and I threw away a bulk of them because it was like pictures of, Sacre-Cœur in Paris, or, and it was sad because they're pictures my dad had taken, but what am I going to do with the picture of,
Yeah.
he had a lot of pictures of the bridge. So I was only looking for pictures with people, mainly with, my brother, my sister and I, and so forth. And it made me kind of sad because it made me think, when I die, are people just going to like chuck everything I just took, right? Even though it's digital, like, does it matter if I have a good picture of elephants or tree frogs, or like, I don't know, like it put it in a bit of perspective. But again,
It is important. It is important. And you have this incredible ability today to build these books. Everybody has, from Lightroom on, you can build books. Several friends of mine who've been on a lot of these geographic trips with me as guests, they take the time to build a book from each trip.
right.
And talking about your dad's slideshow, I always bring that up, that everybody's been to their friend's slideshow where you're going to look at 200 pictures, and by the first picture in the evening, it's going to be a brutal evening, versus that individual that understands that idea of visual narrative, of being brutal on choosing which pictures. Does a picture work or does it not? It really comes down that simply. And they show you a slideshow of 50 pictures, your jaw's somewhere down around your knees by the end of it. You want to see more,
Right.
but you've engaged them, you've got them that whole evening. That's the same thing with laying out a story for Geographic. How do you pick those pictures? How do you make them connect to one another? But yeah, but I think that, and I tell people, can you imagine having great pictures of your family from 200 years ago? How important those would be to you. You have that ability to create those now and to archive them either in a physical book or in your digital files or whatever else. And boy, that opens up a whole other discussion that I go into. Sometimes I'll just touch on that briefly, but I tell people, in this technology of digital photography, you had better have a workflow built. So you have backups, because do you know what the chance of your hard drive failing are? It's 100%. It's
Right.
going to fail. It's going to be
It's not a
5.
matter of if, it's a matter of when.
It's when.
Yeah.
It's when. So I tell people, if you go away from this with anything from you, it's back up your work. And there's a lot of thinking now that the only way to permanently back up your work is to actually print it, which is still, even printing is still a finite life. It's interesting where a archivable photograph is considered, well, it's got a 200-year length. 200 years, I'm not going to care, but still, those are important entities, creations, your photographs, that'll define down, because like I said, you think about the Lechevic caves in southern France, where the first cave paintings were discovered, considered up to 35 to 60,000 years old. How important those are to it. So those were our first archivists that were sitting around, decided to, with charcoal, paint a painting of their hunt that day. And you look at it now, and what an amazing narrative that creates. So again, we're visual creatures. We want to, like I said, we think in terms of still images. Our mind works so rapidly.
So Jay,
So yeah, I'm passionate.
do you think there was a second caveman next to him going, hey, you need to also paint that somewhere else?
Absolutely. Or asking, like, don't you have
Probably.
Photoshop? You can take the horns off that bull and just
Yeah. Or no, make sure you back it up onto a different cave in case.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually, I'm going to show some of your images here in a second,
Sure.
but I want to ask you this. So I've told people know I back up. So at the risk of, like, over there in the corner is my other Drobo. Here's my Drobo 8D over here. And over there is my my Drobo A10N, which on the desk that's been cleaned up a bit. And that one synchronizes every night at 11 o'clock to another A10N, which is in Sacramento, about 200, 150 miles away from here. So every image I have is not only backed up here in two places, but also 150 miles
Yep.
away. Do you do something similar to that? Or?
Oh, I've got 6 RAID systems going here. 1 8 bay, 3 4 bays, 6 4 5 2 bays. Yeah, I'm just, and because I early in my digital career, I was actually photographing our son going through his Eagle Scout project. I called the editor of Boys Life magazine, the Boy Scout magazine, who I knew this guy, and I said, "Man, you guys ought to do a story on guy going through his Eagle Scout project." And he said, "We've been thinking about that for a while. Do you know anybody?" And I said, "I sure do." So I did a story on my son, but the first third of it, I shot it. I had it on my MacBook. This was back in the early 2000s. And I had a hard drive failure, and that was the only place it was. And if you ever hear a hard drive failure, it's a sound you'll never forget.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, darn, this does not sound good. And I sent it into Apple, and they called back and said, okay, if you want to give us your credit card, it's $900, and it's about a 90% chance of not recovering anything.
Right.
And it's like, I'm never going to let this happen again. Yeah. So I'm just,
Jay, but everything backed up locally there, or do you have anything off-site? Like if you have a fire?
I have kept I keep 2 hard drives in a safety deposit box that I bring in. I haven't done it for a few months now. I need to do that. I'm glad you reminded me. And I'll put my real prime images on that and take it back so I have offsite, because yeah, if something happens, you are just out of luck. And I keep looking for cloud storage that works. And I tried a couple of companies. I wasn't overly happy. And there was that one company years ago that a lot of pros, I forgot the name of it, signed on.
Yeah.
You remember that. And they went out of business
Right.
kind of without telling people that. So this is amazing technology until you have failure, then it's pure voodoo magic.
Yeah.
And that's where you've got to have a plan set up. And
So
one
people
thing
are, people writing in saying Google Drive unlimited cloud storage for $30 a month, which is good. Or you could, I don't pay anything a month because I've got the Drobos, which are pretty cool with that system. Backblaze, another one that John's got. Someone else, Marsh is also using it. So yeah, well, you and I should talk about that offline as well. I want to.
Yes, I do want to actually.
Yeah,
So go.
I want to jump over. I want to share. Let's see the best way to do this. Bear with me here, everybody. I'm gonna. I want to show. Actually, let me start with some of your rock and roll stuff here. So give me a sec to.
Yeah, I can kind of preface that while you're doing that if you want.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I started in the business. I was an English lit major in college. My parents came from that generation where I needed to get a job at the company, stay there till I got my gold watch at the end. I told them I wanted to teach English. They about had a heart attack. 3 years into my college career, I decided I want to be a photographer. And that just about did them in. But some of the first stuff I started shooting in the 60s, late 60s, was rock and roll. This is some later stuff, but so we're on screen with that, Jeff?
Yep. I think you see it, right? Yeah.
So these are the Rolling Stones in a concert in Dallas. So this is back further on in the like 81. But what I love about this image is the kind of the primal aspect. It's a pouring rainstorm. Keith Richards is not plugged into the electricity with his guitar, obviously, but what I've always looked for in photographs is moment. And I think moment just trumps everything in a good photograph. And I always also think that it's our job as photographers. You are responsible for that viewfinder, 100% of it. I'm a real believer that if you can, you crop when you shoot. Everybody crops. I crop, you crop, especially in sports. Holy cow, some you just can't get the perfect. So we all crop, but in others, so many other types of photography, reportage, photojournalism, street photography, everything else, I think you are, and an uncropped image is the kind of the ultimate goal, because you're saying I'm watching the edges of this, because it's so easy when something really wonderful is happening to zone in what's happening in the middle of the picture, and you're not looking at the edges of the frame.
Actually, you had Jay. I was just watching um, the documentary that from Pete Souza, and
Oh, that was wonderful.
it's a great documentary. And if people here have not seen it, you got to see it. But one of the things that he did that I loved is he shot really wide, like almost
Yeah.
all the time. And I tend to shoot really tight. Portraits, I'm really in the face, and he shot really wide, and it made me think, crap, I need to shoot wider more often. Like it was so good. So
That documentary and his work is spectacular, absolutely. And yeah, I love shooting wide too, and it does throw a responsibility on you because you're taking in so much more area. And
yeah,
to me, your eye needs to dash around the frame, especially when something great is happening. Don't miss a darn moment.
right.
But this picture of Chuck Berry, to me, the moment is him doing his duck walk, with the foot kicked out. And I tell folks, when you see a great photograph, if it's Sousa's or if it's anybody else's great photograph, and it just resonates with you, I always suggest to people, break it down. Why is that working with you? Well, it's the moment, it's the structure, it's the integrity, it's all these different elements. Well, which drives it all? And look how many times it's a moment. Look at Sousa's work from that presentation,
Yeah,
where Obama's bending over the little kid touching his hair.
love
What
that
a
shot.
stunning moment! Oh my God!
I love that his feet are really sharp here, and there's a little bit of motion in the guitar. I like that.
Yep, yep.
I'm assuming that's because that's probably the best you could push at the time, right?
Well, this was 2400 ISOs in a small club. It was, 60th of a second. And I tell people too that I think a good photographer knows their equipment so well that it gets out of the way.
Yep.
You instinctively, when you pick it up, to me, when a camera goes on around your neck, you're thinking and seeing photographically, and the camera's ready. There's nothing worse than having the camera on your neck and you look up and you see a great moment occur and you miss it because you're
Yep.
fumbling with the camera.
I tell people all the time, like whenever Canon gets me prototypes before the Olympics, I tell them I need at least a month in advance because I need to be intimately knowledgeable of every button and dial.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
But
Janice.
but having said that, Janis Joplin, yeah, this is a Texas pop again, and it's interesting because these pictures are available. We sell them through a gallery. It's called, and my work is pretty good. It's okay on this stuff, but they have people that's called Morrison Hotel Gallery, and they carry a lot of Henry Diltz, Jim Marshall, all these Lynn Goldsmith, these famous rock and roll photographers, and go to their website and visit it. It's, oh my God, there's legendary images on there.
Yeah, well, I've known Lynn for almost as long as I've known you.
Oh, it's just amazing. Yeah, Lynn's wonderful.
Didn't she start
But
as a groupie and then
yeah, well, she doesn't refer to it as a groupie. She was a
okay, I digress.
but again, what do you know, this picture where it's moment? This is 1969, Led Zeppelin on their first American tour. And it
Wow.
was just so, this is working with Tri-X. This is working with black and white. My first camera was a Honeywell, or this may have been with the first Nikon I actually owned, which was so cool. But you'd shoot stuff and full frame, and you'd just be so careful, and you see this, and you would watch this in front of you. And you knew that it was like, okay, this is my responsibility to make this a strong image. And again, it's a real simple moment because Jimmy Page has his face towards the camera. His fingers are on the frets, his other hands on strumming the guitar or picking, and Robert Plant's in the background putting his head back. So all those various elements.
Hmm.
And I think studying other photographers' work is a really powerful way to grow in your own work, because you're not stealing their style or anything else. Or then you get in really close and tight on Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols and their one and they did a tour in the United States. And this was, a punk rock. So it was like, oh, this kind of captures
Yeah.
the anger and the venom in these guys. And it was just really, and this is obviously later. This is again 79 or so, but I quit shooting rock when it became really corporatized, and there were companies behind these artists, and you were given 1 minute or 2 minutes to
Yeah,
shoot.
that's now it's like the three songs and out. I hate it.
Well, it's even worse than that. But one other thing, there are several artists now that photograph them require that you sign a release that they own the copyright to your work,
I know. Forget that. I
which
won't
is
share it.
obscene.
Yeah, it's irritating. Oh,
Well,
so we're
it's
back. All right. So
well, well, that's back to the Stones again.
let me
But
jump over to I don't let's see. Tell me, can you guys see this shot? Are we
uh,
still on?
this was during a geographic assignment. I'm up in the Arctic. It was a really interesting, and this is what I love about this business that I've gotten to be in is they call when I'd see in everybody's contract with the magazine today. They haven't had a. They only got one staff member, two staff members. We're all contract because, and the benefit is you own your work, so you can resell it. But and when you get a phone call from them, I'd see on the caller ID like, oh, it's geographic. Where are they? What life changing thing is going to happen when I answer that phone? And they said, hey, we've got a story on a scientific program. It's in the Arctic. We need you to fly to Barrow, then get on this twin otter to fly out a couple of 100 miles out into the Arctic Ocean, stay in an ice camp for a couple of weeks, and then a nuclear attack sub is going to come up through the ice and photograph that. Then we have it arranged for you to spend a week on the sub under the Arctic ice. So it's like, oh my God, I've twisted my arm a little bit here, but this is, it was amazing because it was, when the sub actually surfaced, and I don't think I've got a picture of that in this, no, but it's such a cool picture. But I was working in minus 45-degree weather. And this was in film days. And this is where the film would break, trying to rook it. You get the static marks on it. You try to take your glove off to load the camera. Your fingers would be freezing. The camera would freeze to your nose. You had to pull it off and pull, you don't see the Band-Aid on my nose there. But it was
Were you claustrophobic on the sub?
no, it was interesting. I thought I would be. I was curious. I just was curious.
Huh.
It was amazing. When we first submerged, they'd come up through the ice, which was incredibly dramatic, and they'd gone under the ice. They'd gone underwater off of Hawaii, and then they transited the entire way up to where we were in the Arctic, up to the Barrow Straits, underwater. I spent one of the things we did, I worked with an ice captain. We went out on the ice in a lead, which is the perfect place for it to surface through, to mark a big spot with a shovel, big X on the ice. The ice was about 18 inches thick. And then the day before we knew the sub was going to be there, we went out and drilled a hole the morning of, we went out and drilled a hole with an auger in the ice and then dropped a transponder down through the ice, sent out a signal, and the USS Hawkbill homed in on that. Then they get below us. They say, okay, and they were using an upward looking video. They could see where we were through the X. Talk about, going from high technology to analog totally.
Wow.
And they saw the X and they said, okay, we'll alert you to when we're going to do it. And some other sailor types in brass came out to watch this. And yeah, it was amazing. But when she came up, several hours they were on, and some of the sailors came out to hit golf balls on the ice because last time they'd seen sun was in Hawaii. And then I got boarded the sub, and then they do the classic dive, whoop whoop, and all this, and you could hear the ice scraping the sail as we sank. The water was about 8,000 to 12,000 feet deep at that point. But it was intriguing. One of the first things they do is they take the new visitors on board the sub. It was a writer from Geographic and myself, and they initiate you. We went to the torpedo room, which they turned into a scientific lab, actually, because they kind of loaned this ship to the scientific program, but it was still a commissioned warship, so they had two defensive torpedoes on board. But they take you down to the torpedo room, and as to christen you on board, they open the torpedo tube and you get inside and you crawl to the end of the torpedo tube and you touch the outside seawall. And then for a joke, they close the door on you.
Oh God.
You're in there. And I kept expecting to hear the depressurization, like you're going to thump me into the ocean. But it was amazing.
All right, on that note, we're shifting because you're freaking me out now.
It was weird. And then talk about something different. This was on a geographic expedition. I do a lot with Lindblad. They were the first company that started doing Antarctic expeditionary travel anybody back in the 70s. But this was in South Georgia, which is my place on earth. And it's a colony of a group of waddle of penguins coming out of the ocean. Gentus, those are macaronis, I think. But what I tell folks on this is framing is incredibly, I use a micro four thirds format. That's why it's a little bit more square than 35 millimeter. It's full frame, but making really sure that I'm leaving space on that lower right for that front of the group of penguins to waddle into. And I also made sure I had space in that far left one for it to enter the frame. So again, it's that thing building the frame. And I also put the cardinal rules. You never put your horizon dead center. Well, a lot of the great impressionistic painters got away with it. And to me,
Your sky is so good there.
well, yeah, and if the sky were solid blue, you couldn't do it.
Right.
And if the sky is blown out, you can't do it because in art and in photography, our eye is always on to the brightest area. But I had this cool ocean going on, I had this incredible sky, and that great group of penguins coming out. So it gave a sense of what I was seeing at the time. And I think that's our job. Everybody's job as a photographer is to put your viewer into that place, to let them know what it feels like to be there.
I bet you were happy to have those clouds there.
Oh, it was like, and the light was just that soft filtered light. It was like an oh my God moment. Yeah, and the little reflection on the beach. So everything was working on that.
Even the waves are cool with the wind blowing the water off the top.
Exactly. Oh, it was one of those scenes, and you're just kind of watching. We do our own first light workshops. We do we've got two coming up. We had to cancel this summer because of everything, but we wanted CM Ranch and another smaller ranch called Absaroka. We have a couple of openings at Absaroka Ranch. You can see them on the website, shameless promotion, but they're built around equine photography, about horses and cowboys, and wranglers. And this is a horse drive that we actually do a couple of times during the week. It's a drive they do. They move the horses from one pasture to the other, one meadow to the other. And it's just this stellar event. It's funny because the ranch tells me if their insurance company knew what we were doing, they would drop them in a heartbeat because they run these horses where they're, 125 horses full tilt. We're in the middle of them. And, we're trying to, stay aware. If the horse runs at you, put your hands up in the air. But again, it's a structure. I love this diagonal flow of the photograph.
The directional light.
Yeah,
really cool.
Well, the backlit on the horse in the front right, to me is just like, I love that. And it's just, you have the energy.
And I've been, is this Taj?
That is the Western Mosque. The Taj Mahal is my back.
Yeah.
And really, yeah. And I've been lucky. I've been to the Taj Mahal 15 times, and every time it's kind of different. And this day we got there and it was completely fog encased. You couldn't see anything. Huh. And I walked by the Yamuna River. That's up on that. If you've been there, that plateau, on the western side. And I walked over there and you can see the Western Mosque just starting to kind of come out of the fog. And these two guys walked down there in the left foreground, like, oh my God, this couldn't be better because I have my scale, but it gives a reason to have that whole area on there. But I love this incredible Western Mosque just appearing out of that ethereal fog. So I'll tell you, when
the reason this slide, for everybody who's on this call, everybody needs to stop and think of us for a second, because here's the thing. I've been to the Taj Mahal and we had a great clear day. We got very lucky actually with the air quality. But if you were to show up to Taj Mahal and it's fogged in like this, 95 or 98% of people would think, oh crap, this is horrible shooting conditions, right? And yet here you are with one of your favorite images taking advantage of that. And I think it's really important for people to see this, because lemons and lemonade, right? You take something and make it something interesting. And you're right. The fact that you're clear enough to see the guys at the bottom and clear enough to see the top of this in sunlight makes it incredible. This one really resonated with me because I've been there and didn't see this, of course, but it's cool that you saw something that most people wouldn't.
Well, and this is what I tell people too. I'm glad you brought that up because to me, when you have those atmospherics such as fog and sleet and snow and uh, these conditions, it can be ethereal shooting conditions. And shameless plug for my camera company. One thing I like about my equipment is it's so small, it's with me there when I need it, but its weather resistance is ridiculous. So I'm not afraid to work in fog conditions. This isn't bad conditions at all, but in horrible conditions because those conditions can be some of the most interesting in which to work.
Right. Which is interesting because of the rainforest. We have a lot of people that complain and say, "Well, I heard it's going to rain. Why you're in the rainforest?" And it makes for some really killer shots. This one here, where is this taken?
This is in Sri Lanka. It's on the western Willigama, which is on the western southernmost point, and there's famous fishermen that go out there, and they actually still fish for sardines in this way. And I'm using a shameless plug, my Stingray neutral density grad filter because I want to give away light. I want to get rid of light because I want to shoot a slower exposure. This is about a second and a half, and I wanted that water to have just a fluidity, kind of a mercurial look to it. While these fishermen up there, you can see a little motion in the arms, which is fine with me.
Right.
I read once what we look for in photographs. One of the first things we look for are eyes. Then we look for sharpness.
Right.
Then we look for diagonals. But if you have sharpness, your eye can rest on that. And then it kind of pulls back and you accept the blur as motion or as another dynamic that I think can create an interesting image. But this is one of those things where, we were there at dawn when the guys were out there. Sun was just about to come up and you realize like, okay, this is the prime light and it's going to be maybe here for 1 or 2 minutes.
Right.
So that's where I keep saying you've got to be ready so that you're not fumbling with equipment instead of photographing the situation.
And Jay, you're on a tripod here, right?
That I did have a tripod, but I'll be honest with you, the new equipment they have out, they have an IBIS on it that I'm shooting sometimes if I have to. I've shot 6-second handheld exposures. So
Really?
I'm not lying to you. 6 second that have been sharp. I don't mean kind of like, oh, that has an apparent sharpness. I mean like zooming in and there's sharp detail.
Wow.
So the equipment is, but still always try with me. I hate them until you need them. Then
Yeah.
they're your best friend.
Yeah,
But
they weigh a lot. More to pack.
yeah, well, yeah, and I use lightweight stuff. And my whole mission in my life has been to try to reduce weight and presence.
Yeah.
But this is up in Montana. I was working with Geographic on setting up a photo program at a ranch up there. So I photographed into the ranch in winter, and it was brutal. And we had a blizzard come through, and same thing. It was like, oh my God, blizzard! Let's get out there. This could be awesome. So went out there, and we had these incredible situations. And again, I could have shot this at a slower shutter speed, and made the snow have more of a mysterious ethereal look to it, or I could shoot at a high shutter speed where I gave that really sharp definition of the snow. Which one should I use? Well, it depends.
Right.
What's going to work for that particular moment. That's what I love about photography because to me, when you pick that camera up, every situation is a separate set of dynamics. What am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to say? To me, it's always a challenge. Photography is always problem solving. And that's what I love about it because you're always having to think.
And I think, for everybody who's watching, next time we all have crappy weather, we're all going to be excited about it.
I hope so. Yeah, because it can be marvelous to shoot in. Oh,
I love this shot.
that was a fun one. Yeah. And I love photographing horses. That was a fun situation. This is in Myanmar, which was the old Burma. And it's on Inle Lake, which is famous for its lotus and blossoms. And they also have this. But they also have silkworms. So this woman is weaving silk, and I just like it for the gentle. The light I think helps create a bit of the ambiance here. And again, it's just really kind of careful framing because I didn't want to cut those windows off on the left. I like the reflection on the lower left. I like her. Usually I think sometimes if you center things, it can be the kiss of death, but it depends. On this one, it worked. And I like her, that moment of her touching, reaching up to touch
Yes.
the wheel up there with those two colors, blue color spools of silk about to come down. So to me, it's just, this is a sense of place, but it's introducing my character too.
Yeah, she has a great face too.
Oh, she was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
So Jay, did you pose her? Did you just let her do her thing?
Did I what?
Did you have her? Did you say put your hands up? I mean,
No, no, because if you do that, it usually stinks of that. You know, I
yep.
talk about, so what I tell in photographing people is I love photographing people. I think, you know, that's how we share who we are is through if our photographs. But it's an intimidating process. But I photograph people all the time. I'm a friendly guy. I usually smile, do these kind of simple things. But ideally, the situation can happen where I come in and obviously people are going to know you're there.
Right.
But I try to, you know, and they'll stop and look at you and turn to you and you want to take my picture, go ahead. And I just say, you know, go back to what you're doing. I just put my hands down, put my camera down. I get boring. They need to go back doing what they did in the first place. Then the onus falls upon you as a photographer to work the situation. And plus you have, so this is a very candid picture. You know, she'd kind of forgotten I was there, but you have a tool on the camera. Let me step back. In film days, when I'd photograph people, I always carried a Polaroid with me and I'd give people Polaroids. Now you have this tool on the back of the camera, the monitor, that I can share images with people. And I try to shoot something for a while, and you can read when you've entered a relationship with somebody when you ask them to photograph them. You know, get them to ignore you, they go back to doing, and they start working. And you realize that this is a finite relationship, partly your time and their time. And pretty soon you start reading, they may be getting done with you. Maybe at that time, show them the picture on the back of the camera. And I can't tell you how far that can go. It's amazing. And I also suggest always send people pictures. If I do a lot of these around the world by private jet trips for Geographic, when we go back to a lot of the same locations, and I print pictures and take them back to those people that I see. But every time you go back, it's different. Every time you go back, it's different. But photographing people is tough, but once you kind of figure it out, and there are times where, you know, I try to read body language and I try to get an eyesight of somebody. If I want to, I'll try to photograph a great moment of them doing something and then decide, well, I don't want to move in. For one, if I'm shooting for the magazine, I have to get a model release, which, that could be I won't even go into that. But if I decide I need to get in to go talk to them, I'll try to make either, you know, you'll read it immediately from them if they're approachable,
Correct.
or I'll try to get in their line of sight and make eye contact and smile, speaking the language or not, and then make the approach if it feels good. There have been those times where it's like, this is not a good situation. I'm just going to fade away and be gone. But I'll tell you, man, what I love about this business is this, and it's photographing people. I can't tell you the number of friends I've made and everything worldwide, people I see regularly. You know, to me, the camera, and this is a cliche statement, but the camera has been this incredible passport for me.
Me too.
And I always felt that if you glean a little bit from every experience you have, what an education. So sorry, I get really passionate.
No, Jay, I say the same thing. I mean, I was on WhatsApp this morning with a friend of mine in Costa Rica, and also with one of my favorite guides in Africa. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity to get to know people like that you would normally not. And it is pretty cool.
Oh, it's just, yeah. And the other end of the spectrum, we're photographing wildlife. This is one of the most spectacular places on the face of the earth. It's South Georgia. It's an area called Gold Harbor. Massive colonies.
Again, I see. I love this.
King penguins, elephant seals, fur seals, weddles, all these things. So, and I've photographed there a few times. It's hard to get into, and it's interesting because I just saw on the news that there's a huge iceberg heading towards South Georgia. Did you see that? That can has a potential to negatively affect wildlife there. And this is
it could easily hit. It's going to hit, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this is Gold Harbor, and I'm hand holding the camera to second exposure, bracing it there. You know, when I do those slow exposures like that, I'll put the camera in burst mode.
Yeah.
so that I can hold it down, because sometimes when you get excited in that first frame, your hand may go like that. But hold the camera and do it in burst mode, capture two or three or four frames, you have a better chance of getting that really sharp one, because my sharpness is on the center penguin with the big white chest.
Yeah.
And I've got the motion of the ocean water coming in there, which I thought gave a little energy to the photograph, and that nice wave coming the far left. But it's just a spectacular place to go.
I love motion. Speaking of motion, you and I talked about, I love motion panning. I love just shooting at slow shutters. And actually you're capturing my favorite animal in the world right here, because I love dolphins. So
Yeah, and this is hanging off the bow of a ship as the dolphins are bow riding, and I'm shooting at a 15th or 30th of a second.
this one, 15th of a second.
15th of a second. And I found that 15th to a 30th for things like this and for horses is a good shutter speed. People too. It's all relative. If I'm photographing a car and I want to get the blur effect and it's a Formula One racer, I'm at a 125th of a second, because you're going to exacerbate the motion. But to me, this one worked because, again, you have the sharpness on the tail and the water splash, but you get that sense of energy of the motion. And this one I cropped just a little bit left and right, just maybe 5% off of it, because I kind of wanted to bring that energy back in. And like I said, there's points where I crop, everybody crops, but I hope that made sense when because I think it really forces you to become a better photographer.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, people, look at this. Whew, that's awesome.
This is in Bhaktapur, which is in Kathmandu, Nepal. It's an old city. And this is one of the ladies that walks around, and she hopes to come up and do the namaste, and you'll give her 10 cents or whatever. And a street lady, and I spoke to her through sign language. She came up and I said, no, I really don't want that. May I just spend time with you, like half an hour? She's kind of like, okay. And she forgot me, and she was going about, but she stopped for a cigarette break in this kind of open shade. It's like, oh, light situation's great.
Amazing.
Smoking her cigarette. And I thought that gave a much stronger feeling for who this person was than the posed namaste photograph. But what I love about photography is the fact that sometimes does take time to get to that moment.
Right.
And when you shoot long enough, I've been here 40 something years in this business. You know it when the moment happens. You know it. In film days, you knew it. In digital, you can see it. But when everything comes together, you know it. And it's, again, to get to when you're so comfortable with your camera equipment, and you automatically, and people say, well, which exposure mode do I shoot in? And I tell them, well, it depends.
Right.
What am I trying to get? Am I trying to control my zone of focus? Am I trying to control my shutter speed? I'm sure you probably in your business shoot shutter priority.
No, actually, rarely do. I'm almost always aperture priority, but I use my ISO to control the shutter. And then Olympics, it's all manual, because the light is really consistent.
Yep. But again, I mean, you came from the same world I did, which was film. And this was, to me, it was an incredible teacher. I shot almost a huge amount of assignments for Geographic on slide film. And slide film has no latitude for error.
Right.
You're a quarter stop either way.
Her skin, like it's just awesome.
Well, this was digital. This is the Olympus, and it's just a stunning quality, and to get that detail. And I don't think this was sharpened. I don't really sharpen many things, because.
And it's f4. I was surprised. I thought it would be at 5.6. It's actually f4. It's really
well. Don't forget that it's a micro 4/3, so everything get that little about a extra depth of field. But I honestly couldn't tell you generally what. I'd have to look at the picture to tell you what the aperture, or look at the.
This one was at f1. This one was at f1.2. The other one was at
This is f1.2 on purpose. They've got a lens out. They have 17, which is equivalent to a 34. They have a 25, and they have a 45, which is equivalent to a 90, 1.2s. And they could have welded those things open at 1.2 as far as I was concerned. And because I love the bokeh that you get on this lens.
Right.
This is a sadhu in Pashupatanath in Kathmandu. It's a holy man. And I've seen this guy a number of times now. We're on first name. I've got my personal buddy sadhu, my holy man, he's a great guy. It's a whole different world, but I love the intensity of his eyes
Yeah.
and the intensity of the
And the
color.
best part is I could see you in that. I could see you shooting in his eyeballs.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty fun.
And to me, it was like one of those things when you shoot that, it's like, oh my God, because, and this one, we were out somewhere and I said, hey, I want to take your picture because I asked permission. And he started to move into the sun. I said, no, just, back into that little open shade because sun was coming up behind him. He's in this open shade area. There's a white building behind me that's acting as a reflector. So I'm always trying to look at lighting situations to see what the light's going to be, how it's going to affect the image, this type of thing.
Have you printed this and brought it to him?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've taken my pictures back to my sadhus every year, and it's amazing because these are true, holy men. They live in very uh, extraordinarily simple situations.
This is another friend of yours. This looks like
That's
a
a good
slow
friend of
shutter
mine.
too.
Yeah, he and I are on first name basis. This is in
13th
Grumeti
of a
River.
second.
Well, this is Grumeti River, yeah. And I this crocodile in the Serengeti was parked below a little waterfall and waiting for something to float into its mouth. And you kind of look at that situation, and again, to me, it goes back to that problem solving. What can I do to convey the image of what I'm seeing? Well, the power of what I'm seeing is this incredible water going by this thing, this croc with those incredible eyes and those that dinosaur looking beak
Yeah.
waiting for something to fly to swim into its mouth. So it's like, yeah. So I sat there, and I had this shot. You may have to look at the metadata. What does the metadata say on the length of the lens on that, Jeff?
You're at 150 millimeter.
150 millimeters. So that's 300
130.
millimeters. Don't forget, it's all 2-to-1 on Olympus. So
Right,
that's
so
three.
300 millimeters at 13th of a second. That's hard to hold.
Yeah, but look at the eyes. It's great. And I printed this one about 4 feet wide, about 3 feet tall, and it's just amazing looking.
This is another example where it's great when you see an animal like this in the water like this, and a lot of people would shoot it at 1,000th of a second because there's so much light. But it's great to say, wait, let's try something. I've done this too in Serengeti with the hippos. I had a hippo that was in the fast moving water and it wasn't moving much. I did the same thing, and it makes for such a cool shot when it works. It doesn't always work, but
yeah. And when it doesn't work, you don't tell anybody about that.
You just delete them. Yeah,
Always success pictures. But yeah, but also, I'm really careful on that picture of the croc because I didn't want to bring in any information on the top, because just above the top of that frame were some sticks. And if I had those in there, that would have ruined the integrity of the picture. So again, it's that thing, being aware of what's going on with the energy of your main subject, but then let your eyes dash around the edges to make sure everything is working.
Yeah, what's really cool, I don't know if you guys can see this. I can see it. I've got a big screen here, but I can see all the little droplets of water that are flying up in here above the head.
Oh, it's a fun one to look at all the detail. So it's, yeah.
That's pretty neat.
And
great reflections here.
Yeah. Well, this is up in Ilulissat up in Greenland. It's a World Heritage Site. It's Jacob's Glacier, which comes off the Greenland ice cap, which is the most active glacier on Earth. It calves off massive amounts of ice every day, and this is in the catch basin below it, where these calved off, sometimes behemoths. These things are bigger than a city building. We went out late afternoon on a fishing boat going through this. And again, it's one of those things, well, I want to underexpose this one because it's so easy on ice, especially if you look at a histogram, to blow out exposures.
You're at minus 0.7.
Yeah.
800th of a second at f13 at 20 millimeters, so 56 millimeter equivalent. Yeah.
And this one, I was aware of my f-stop because I wanted that ice to be sharp in the foreground, so it became a frame device for those reflections going on. But it's a pretty simple picture. But again, I think one of those real simple ones. What's the old thing the writer said? I wrote a long story because I didn't have time to write a short one. And it's kind of too, you've got to be really careful on these things of making these simple pictures because everything's got to be working at them.
Yeah. No,
I like it. I look at
it's
it, it's like,
cool.
to me, it's a fun memory of this incredible place I got to go.
Where's this
And
guy?
this is in New Guinea. This is a tribal member. He's in the community hut, and he's getting ready for a ceremony. He's putting his makeup on. He's talking to one of his buddies there. And it's one of those things. I think this is a slow, fairly slow, maybe not. Can't remember.
You were at, I'm looking at metadata. Yeah, fifth of a second.
Fifth of a second. And again, these are all handheld. There's no, I don't have a tripod. You're moving around. It's hot as can be. You're sweating like a storm, and you're trying to shoot every way you can possibly think of. Hopefully, where people kind of forget you're there.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
cool though. That's awesome. All right, let me stop the share here. Let me go back to us here. Let me just look. I know we've had. Let's see here. There's some questions. One question I know someone asked you is, do you shoot any video?
I should. I love video. I still love the still moment, but I find that, especially on like these geographic things, when I'm building that narrative at the end, um, I'll use video sometimes to connect one place to the other. Maybe it's a 2 to 4 or 5 second video clip,
Hmm.
but it's interesting because Geographic, their image collection, really likes to get 10-second video clips of whatever. Um, Not sound unless the sound's really significant to the image, but they love those little 10 seconds. Everything's got to be set up perfectly. I know people like Bob Chris. You know Bob?
Mhm.
Yeah, incredible photographer. Bob's shooting nothing but video. He was he wrote his famous book on travel photography, incredible travel photographer, but he's totally into video now.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
funny. I forget sometimes to kick the camera into video mode. Like I'll be in Africa or somewhere and like, there's a great scene and I have to remember to do it. Sometimes I forget. I've got some really cool footage I've shot. I've never done anything with it because I'm not a videographer, although I'm doing more and more with Premiere now. So I probably should, do that. But interesting that but us, we're purists, right? We're still photographers, and I love the challenge of telling the story in one frame. So I still prefer stills, but
I do too,
I still see the value in video
but
though.
it's interesting because I think it wasn't it Wally McNamee that started the company Platypus some years ago. I think that I'm
Oh,
getting
I
the
don't even
right.
know who started it.
I thought he did,
Hmm.
but the thinking was that they were a company that would take still photographers and teach them for Final Cut and the video process because kind of we're a natural to move into to that world of visual storytelling. And I know that's why I've known several other still photographers who've gone into video,
Right.
just for that power of it. But I still love the still image. I still
So
absolutely love it.
I was talking to a Getty photographer yesterday, a good friend of mine, Don Smith, and Don was telling me that like Getty is now 80% of their revenue is video.
Oh, I'm
Some
not
video.
surprised. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
incredible.
I think
Carl's got a
sometimes
question for you, Jay. Carl wants to know if you've returned to Amero, Colombia, since you were unfortunate enough to have to photograph. Is it Omeira Sanchez?
Armero.
When he was there for
Oh, the little
kind of
girl. Yeah,
disaster. Have you been back there at all?
I've not been back there. Somebody one magazine was going to send me back there to do kind of a going back X number of years later. It was a horrific scene. They know mud that occurred there. It was a fall of there was a volcanic event that melted some of the ice around the top of it and created the massive mudslide that hit this
Hmm.
small town. It killed 20 something thousand people. And yeah, I flew down to that, and there was a famous, yeah, it's a very disturbing photograph of a young lady that had been pinned by cement of a fallen building, and yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, she ended up passing away, but it was, yeah,
What's it like when they send you somewhere like that where it's just really depressing? I guess we're all living in that world today, but
yeah.
um, what's it like when you have to photograph and something like I photographed a funeral of a 13-year-old kid, worst thing I ever had to do,
Oh, it's, yeah.
um, uh, and a twin too. So her twin was there. One had
Oh,
cancer, one didn't. Um, what's it like though to go to a scene where it's like a natural disaster? You've just got I mean, that's got to be really brutal for you.
It is. I worked in El Salvador photographing the war, and that was real tough. That's a body of work that I was very fortunate to win the Pulitzer Prize for. Um, and there were in at times there were some really dangerous times. And I was nearly executed one night, and I was shot directly at. I had two friends that were killed down there. But on those things, I think it was kind of one thing that always resonated in the back of my head was I kept thinking of Eddie Adams' photograph, the Viet Cong suspect getting shot in the head. And I kept thinking of Nick Utt's photograph of the young girl running napalmed in the Vietnam village, and realized that those two photographs helped to bring that, have been attributed to bringing that war to an early close, because that power of those still images was unmistakable. There's no question. And and so we become the conduit, the photographer becomes a conduit to a lot of these situations for a public that may not know the horror that's going on. I mean, it was interesting. I grew up, I usually start a presentation talking about these two books I had in our house when I was a kid called USA Camera at War from 1942, 1943. My dad had them. They were books that he was given as a young man. And they were these collections of photographs from the war. And they were, I attribute that to becoming a photographer today, because I looked at those books and I remember looking at them to seeing some of the pictures they had, Eisenstadt, Millie, and all these incredible photographers' work. And I know that influenced me massively to become a photographer. But it was interesting because those World War II, pretty much everything had to go through the State Department to be cleared to see, for the public to see it.
Right.
A lot of the horrible thing of American casualties weren't always seen. So the Vietnam War was one of the first wars that we had where you had work coming out of it that wasn't censored, wasn't controlled. So again, those two photographs I described, and those situations where you had to, back in newspaper days, I had some things like that too, where you had to go photograph something like, this is the last thing on the face of the earth I want to do is, and where do you have the right as a photographer to infringe on somebody's extremely personal moment?
Right.
So you had to qualify that to yourself. You had to justify it to yourself. And it was often that I think it's important for that public, because we are visual creatures again, to see the end result of a certain horror instead of it's always just kept as a sanitary,
Right.
untouchable component that doesn't touch our lives. That's why we have photographs in newspapers, because photographs resonate with people. It brings you into that world. The Wall Street Journal used to not run photographs before they realized they needed to start running photographs, because we're visual creatures. That's why they started running photographs.
Interesting.
So it's a hard answer. It's and there are times where it's just like the last thing you want to do is be there. And there have been a couple of situations where I actually left because I just couldn't do it.
Hmm.
But you've got to justify that sometimes you have to share that with your audience, not on a voyeur scale, but on a sharing the grief, the depth of grief that someone may feel. So it's a tough call on that. Yeah.
Hmm. Wow. Well, the photos are awesome, of course. The stories are amazing.
Thanks.
If anybody has any additional questions, we're running a little bit over, but if anybody has any questions, fire them off now. Jay, tell everybody your website, or I'm going to plug your book one more time for you because I love this book.
There we go.
Digital photography.
You can still get it. Yeah.
Get it.
And my website is jaydickman.com, jaydickman.com. We're first light in the morning, like first light in the morning, first light workshop, singular, firstlightworkshop.com. We've got a workshop coming up in Namibia that's sold out. We have, it's a photo expedition. We'll do it again probably next year or 2022. Then we've got a workshop at CM Ranch that's pretty well sold out. We may have one spot on that. Absaroka Ranch, which is this stunning ranch, incredibly cool. We do those two workshops at different ranches back to back. We have a couple of openings at Absaroka because a couple of people had to cancel because they could not change because we were supposed to be last summer Now it's going to be next summer. So we have a couple of those, but it's firstlightworkshop.com. And if you can also, I write a blog about photography, and it's called Where's Jay? And it's on First Light Workshops. And if you look on the left side of the page, you'll see Where's Jay? And I try to make it more than just, gee, look at this cool place I am. I try to bring in talking about elements of photography, talking about the template of visual narrative, these kind of things. But holy cow, I've looked at that. I mean, my website is pretty old design at this point, but it's fun to look back at those blogs. They go back to 2009 or earlier.
Yeah, mine are 2008, and I need to go back. Like I keep saying, I'm gonna do that. Like I want to reread like my daily stuff from the Olympics in the past, and I haven't done that either. But look at the website, his workshops. I've never done a workshop. I want to go to one of the ones at the ranch. Those look really cool.
They are beyond belief. We have people
it's very different
back
than what I've shot, so it'd be kind of fun. So Jay, I may talk to you offline about that because I'd like to join you for one of those.
Absolutely. We have people that have come for 5 and 6 of them, and they still get something out of them.
Well, right. This is the great thing about photography is that, like, I've had people come back for multiple trips to Africa for the same reason, because it's different light, different animals, different everything. I mean, the story is different every time. So
yeah, completely.
So thank you for being here. Thanks everybody for joining. Jay,
absolutely.
Your stories are awesome. I will put this. I know Carolyn just wrote and said she missed the first 30 minutes. Don't worry, I will edit this as I always do, and I'll put it up on YouTube here in the next day or two. And so if everybody wants to go back and rewatch it. Jay, your stories are awesome. I miss seeing you for real.
Absolutely. We'll have to see each other, Jeff. Thank everyone for your times. Thank for staying with me. I tend to get jabbering a lot here. I appreciate
we love what we do.
Being with us. Thank you all so much.
I love that you've been doing this that long, and you and I continue to have that passion, which thank God for that, right? I mean, I never want to be bored of this. So
I never could. No, it's been just unbelievable trip.
Good.
Dad said that what a long, strange trip it's been.
Be safe. Everybody be safe. Stay healthy. Everybody have a great Christmas, because we probably won't do one before Christmas. It's a week away. Afterwards, we'll probably do another one. Thanks for joining in. Jay, thank you again for everything. It was amazing. And we will see you all soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff. That was really a stupendous.
Yeah, it's great to have a real photographer on for a change.
You're rapidly turning into, like they said on television, must-see TV. This is must-see Jeff Cable's blog and videos.
It's inspiring for me to hear people like Jay, who I've looked up to for 20 years. Actually, wait, I have to show one more image. Everybody who is not disconnected here, I'm going to show you guys one more. Hold on, because I have an image of Jay that he doesn't even know I have, probably.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So let's see if you remember this. Okay, hold on here. Share screen. We were teaching a Best Buy event, and I was shooting inside the hot air balloon. I don't know if you remember this, Jay. And I said, I need someone to go on the other side of the balloon and give me a silhouette. Do you remember that?
Yeah, wasn't that up in South Park, Colorado?
It was.
Yep.
That's you.
At the Best Buy event.
Yep. There you are.
Yep.
That's my portrait of you.
That's the best picture of me I've seen.
You look amazing there. Oh God, that was and wait, what year was that? Hold on. That was back in 2007. That was 13 years ago.
Good Lord. It's amazing.
Crazy.
Wow.
Crazy. Anyway, you continue to inspire, and everybody else who's on here probably felt the same thing. So pretty cool.
Well, take care. Appreciate your time. Y'all have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you in 2021, I hope.
Thank God. Let's get rid of this year.
Thanks, Jay.
Paula.
Take care. Thank you all.
Later, everybody.